Depending on how vigilant the legal representatives of the Hendrix world are, but every now and again, and right now we're kind of currently in a situation where on YouTube, there's a bunch of people uploading some really good bootlegs, and I'm a sucker for it. I listen to them all the time, and I'm always fascinated. Of course, you see other pictures of that era where it's like he's going through the crowd, holding his, with the fuzz face and the way, it's like he's walking up and the guitars are hanging, the other spare is just kind of leaning up against the amp and so on and so forth. And they always would start off the show, we're like, hold on a second, we're gonna tune up for a little bit, just hang tight. It's like, never mind tuning up backstage or a roadie handing him it was like the Wild West. And then they just start and you never know what was going to happen. But to this day, I'm just such a sucker for it. But when I saw your set at the Experience Hendrix thing, I thought it was awesome. I really enjoyed the I Don't Live Today thing when you went on that Whammy Bar rampage. It was definitely interstellar. And it's an interesting thing. I mean, I did not grow up listening to metal for the most part. I had like the first couple Van Halen records, but for whatever reason, it's like I never learned Eruption. I thought, you know what? My buddy's got that stuff taken care of. I was more kind of, I guess I kind of regressed more and was just really into like the blues stuff and stuff that kind of fed into like, why did Hendrix get to where he was at? And why did Cream, how did Clapton get there? So I kind of went back there, and then I thought, well, if you could take that stuff and go a little bit farther down the road, maybe that's what I'll do. And so I was kind of more in that world. And so I wasn't all that much into, more of the hard rock guitar players and so on and so forth. But the thing I always noticed about your playing is that it's you, as much as you had developed all these, like, obviously all the modern techniques from the legato stuff and, tapping and, sweeps and all that other kind of stuff, which is, you perform magnificently. But you never forgot about the intrinsic blues phrasing and rocking the pocket. I mean, even when I was listening to some of your stuff this morning as I was on my walk, and it's like, even when you're doing like the shred stuff, it's got a pocket. It's, you know what I mean? It's just, there's no like random schweedling. There's intention and it's conversant. There's a conversation going on where it all relates. And I'm just wondering, how did you get to that point? I mean, when you listened to the Squares record, which you were very kind to send me a while back, and I enjoyed that immensely. But even then, I mean, your tone and your touch, it was like, obviously, it wasn't like a light switched. I mean, you were already very, to the point where you could have easily transitioned to an instrumental guitar thing at that point in time, as far as your technique and tone and so on were concerned. But how did you get into this point where it's like, I'm going to create this, basically instrumental guitar pop with this informed technique and so on and so forth to make this, it's pocket pop music. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the way I look at it. Is that the way you look at it?
I think because of when I was born and what I grew up listening to, that I just seek that out. It sounds wrong to me if I'm not hearing it. If I'm, I don't approach things from a technical point of view. I always approach them from a compositional point of view, and it always exposes something that I can't do. And I go, okay, is it worth it? Does this song really need me to figure this new technique out? And if the answer is yes, then I go about where I teach myself how to play. You mentioned sweeping, and I got to tell you, I remember having a conversation with one of the guys at the Ibanez custom shop many years ago, and he brought that up. He just suddenly, talking this, that, and he goes, and of course, all of your sweeping technique. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, this sweep thing that everyone's, copied that you're doing. And I'm like, help me out here. Like, what song? What are you talking about? And he had to tell me what people thought about what I had done. And I had to laugh because, as I said before, it was really a product of me trying to figure out, like, I hear the sound in my head. Wouldn't it be great if the guitar could do that kind of a thing? And then I go to play it and I go, well, I can't pick that fast. It's like, how am I going to do that? And I just sit there and fool around. And then I arrive at a spot and I go, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'll practice that. And then when I'll tell the engineer, I got some stupid little thing I got to try here. It's going to take an hour, whatever.
Right.
And we just sit there and we just wonder, like, is that the way it's supposed to sound? Okay, great. And, we would construct things, but always about the composition. And then it wouldn't wind up unless it was, best I could do, or we did achieve that sort of thing you call, which is to keep it in the pocket, to keep it really listenable. I never wanted it to be a demonstration at the risk of being out of pocket. You know what I mean?
Right.
But my upbringing, as the youngest of 5 kids, so all my siblings listened to early rock and roll, blues. There's lots of jazz in the house because my parents, that was their generation's music. Lots of soul music, Motown music. So there's James Brown, there's Montgomery, there's everything you can imagine, but it's all in the pocket. And that's what I grew up listening to, just trying to get the approval of my cool siblings, they were the coolest people. So I just realized, wow, this is when I would sit on the floor in the corner and watch my older sisters have dance parties and they'd be dancing to Motown music with all their friends. I'd say, oh, this is what moves people. They hear thing and they all get up and magic happens, and I noticed my parents the same way, different kind of music, but they would lean towards a certain kind of player. And it's because I could see they're recognizing that thing that we would call pocket as musicians. And so I thought, okay, that's something that's got to be there. And then every time I was wound up in a band that I stuck with, it was because like-minded musicians. And we would help each other, remind each other songs. It's kind of like at rehearsal where, your friend says, you're kind of pushing it there when you get to the bridge or something like that. And you go, oh, sorry, and you got to figure out ways to remind yourself as you're concentrating on your technique that nobody hears what's going on in here. They only hear what's coming out of here. Right. So it's a very important thing to get out of that idea of, I am now going to demonstrate to you a technique, and nobody's interested in that unless you're giving a lesson, Right. So, but our audience, our collective audience out there, normal people who like listening to music, they are not interested in all the stuff that we're working on. They're just like, okay, that's your department. Could you please just make some great music? Right. So we always have to focus on that. Where our whole point is to make beautiful, great music for people.
Right. And I can dig it.
Tell them about it. Yeah, at Hendrix, that was Hendrix, right? I mean, he was never was demonstrating. He was never, it was never didactic. It was never methodical. It was just like, he just thought of it. And yet he somehow pulled it off. And, you mentioned that Hendrix gig. Isn't that the scariest thing when you got to play a Hendrix song in front of people who've known the music for 60 years?
Oh, absolutely.
And at some point you go, I'm not Hendrix, never going to play it like him, so I might as well play it like me.
Right. Well, you did it. It was magnificent. Well, one of the things that I was kind of I was getting at from the point of view is it seems to me that not everyone, but it's like you've still given the attention to the greasy, bluesy rock licks. And that stuff, as I well know, it has to be recalibrated relatively often to keep the grease coagulated.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, do you like to play along with records still? I still love playing along with records. I mean, do you kind of go back to the well a little bit to some initial influences or particular things like, you know what, I need to kind of get my, tweak my vibratos and bends and stuff a little bit. I think I'm going to listen to X, Y, and Z. Is there anything like that?
Yes. I love doing that. Yeah. At the beginning of the year, obviously I spend just hours every day playing with my catalog because we were just like a week away from going to Europe and doing the starting off the shape-shifting tour. But when I'm not doing that, when I'm at home and I'm writing and just enjoying being off the road, I do like to, let's say, put down the chrome guitar and I'll pick up a Telecaster and I'll put on like Clapton the Cradle, and it's just every musician on it is brilliant, and they're all greasy on every single track pretty much. And you can I can just forget myself and play the guitar, a Tele, which is, so, as you know, is really hard to play, and no bells and whistles on a Tele, and just sit there and be somebody else and listen to your vibrato and listen to how you bend and see if the instrument changes the way you play or the way you feel about certain notes or riffs. Just sort of enjoy the fact that other musicians play so differently, than yourself. So I do like to do that. I think I spend more time playing with my weird backing tracks that I make notes to help me focus on certain things. One thing I noticed that as I've been getting older is that it's really one of the things that I used to, which is to make sure that you arch your fingers and really position the string under the best possible spot on the on your fingertips, is that it's getting harder and harder. As my keeps saying, lay on the couch and watch TV. That's like, I keep hearing that. And then the other part says, you need to practice, old man, So then I noticed that, one of those things, it gets to be harder to work on, like harder to wake up. When I was 20, it was like, it took like so much energy just to get myself to calm down. That was the thing that always got in my way. Too much energy, energy expended on the fretboard, And so now as things move on, things change. So when I go to, let's say, play to Eric Clapton record or something like that, I start to realize, wow, it's different than it was, let's say, ago, because my hands are different, Right. I've more cultured hands. I could say older hands, or I could say more experienced hands. and I start to go, wow, I'm learning something today because, I'm about 10 years older than you, and every year's a new thing. Every month is a new challenge when you're dealing with a physical thing that you're doing that requires like so much attention and detail to movement and expenditure of energy and all that kind of stuff. And so playing with those other records has really helped me forget about, let's say, the fact that I have to play Mystical Potato Head Groove Thing tomorrow night or something like that. But it's a more, it helps you focus on a broader aspect of your technique. Let me just say one thing about Clapton, which is cool, which is that I realized that there are things that, let's say, Hendrix did that were like world creating, like a machine gun. It's just an entire universe, a world of guitar playing. You just sit there and study that for the rest of your life. Covers all sorts of ground. Then you've got guys like Jeff Beck who can come in and for 8 bars just make you go, what the hell was that? Like, how does anyone even think that that's going to be a guitar part? And then all of a sudden it's as big as the Grand Canyon and you go, oh my God, the guy's a genius, right? And then you got Clapton, who somehow can play a solo for 800 bars, and he never crashes and burns. Right. He's not like Jeff Beck, like, I'm allowed to crash right now because of what I just did. You see what I just did? So I'm just going to stop for a second, So, but it's not like, I never see that or hear that Clapton's playing. He sounds, I'm going to start here. I'm going to keep you interested all the way through here. I am never going to mess up. I'm just never, ever going to mess up. And then he finishes and he goes back to singing and you're like, oh my God, that, to me, that's amazing. So that's one of the things, like when I'm playing along with From the Cradle, I'm thinking, this guy recorded this live, you know. They set up and they played this thing live and it sounds like it. You can hear him step up to the mic and get too close and then play. And Andy Fairweather Lowe, who played on that record, was telling me that it was, the takes that they had, the outtakes were even more amazing. But Clapton had to figure out what's the criteria for a good take over all the other good takes, and it turned out to be the solo. So if he got through the solo and he thought it was really cool, then that would be the take they would keep, even though there may have been a take where the band was more in the pocket or the vocals were better. The guitar solo comes first, and I just thought that was really cool that he made that decision, because you have to when you're making a record. You just have to make decisions. But I learned that every time I put on that record, I go, wow, okay, he did this live. He knows how to play guitar.
Yeah, a little bit.